think the currency of leadership is sacrifice. People who care enough about the nobility of their objectives to give all that they have in order to see those objectives come true.
My goal with Regent is to see it not rival Harvard and Yale, but to rival Oxford and the Sorbonne in the Middle Ages as a school that can impact the whole society.
If we really want to change the world, we have to understand what the world really is so that we can effectively reach those people.
In the time that I've been at Regent, I could just feel the Lord calling me to serve Him and to serve His people.
You can tell the professors, the administrators, everyone that they're willing to pour into your life.
There's so much opportunity for you to become a success that will make history tomorrow.
It wasn't just me, it wasn't just my story. That God was doing the same thing throughout the world.
If we are a dedicated and committed people, making the world a better place to be is what it's all about.
Ladies and gentlemen, Regent University welcomes you to a presidential candidate forum with Senator Ted Cruz. Now, to open our program, Regent University Vice President, Mrs. Anne LeBlanc.
Good evening. We are so pleased that you're with us tonight. Thank you for coming to this special event here at Regent University. We are also pleased to welcome guests joining us via simulcast in our chapel building located next door, as well as online viewers that are joining us in our live stream event of tonight's activities. During the forum today, you will have the opportunity to participate in a live audience poll. Using your cell phone, you just text to the poll, Regent Forums, all one word, to 37607. The selected poll results will be shared at the end of the evening, so be sure and get your entries in by 7:30 this evening. For those participating online, instructions can be found at regent.edu/poll. If you haven't already turned in your question card, you can hold that up right now, and that's one of these great little cards. If you haven't turned it in and you want to ask a question, get that done right now. Hold it up, and one of our student ambassadors will come and pick the questions up to have them have those opportunity to be asked to Senator Cruz. Additionally, you can submit your questions via email at candidateforums@regent.edu. We would like to thank some of our special friends today that have helped us make these forums possible. First, the Christian Broadcasting Network and CBN News for producing and live streaming today's forum. And then we also want to acknowledge our public officials and other special guests that are with us tonight. Thank you for joining us. And our presenting sponsor, the American Center for Law and Justice. It is now my pleasure to introduce the Regent University Singers performing an a cappella rendition of the Star-Spangled Banner. When we reach the national anthem, we would ask that you would stand. Regent Singers, join us.
Shore dimly seen through the mist of the deep, where the foe's haughty host in dread silence reposes. What is that in the breeze? as it fitfully blows, half conceals, half discloses. Now it catches the gleam of the morning's first beam, in glory reflects, and now shines on the stream. 'Tis the star-spangled banner, oh, love the made wave o'er the land of the free and the home of the brave.
And thus be it e'er, when free men shall stand between their loved home and the war's desolation, blessed with victory and peace, may the heaven rescued land praise the power that hath made and preserved us a nation. Then conquer we must, when our cause it is just, and this be our creed: in God is our trust, and the star-spangled banner in triumph shall wave o'er the land of the free and the home of the brave. Oh, say, can you see by the dawn's early light what so proudly we hailed at the twilight's last gleam, and bright stars through the perilous fight o'er the ramparts we watched were so gallantly streaming, and the rocket's red glare, the bombs bursting in air, gave proof through the night that our flag was still there. It was still there. Oh, say, does that star-spangled banner
Aren't they tremendous? You know, they are available. I think there's some notes in your program if you would like to have them come and sing. Now to introduce our moderator, Dr. Jay Sekulow, Chief Counsel for the American Center for Law and Justice. The ACLJ is a law firm and educational organization that focuses on constitutional law. Jay is also Chief Counsel of the European Center for Law and Justice, a nationally recognized and respected defender of constitutional freedoms. He has assembled one of the most prestigious law firms in the nation. In 2005, Time magazine called the ACLJ's a powerful counterweight to the ACLU. Jay received his PhD from Regent University and is an honors graduate of Mercer Law School and Mercer University. He has served as a visiting fellow of Oxford University. He is the author of the #1 New York Times best-selling book, Rise of ISIS, a threat we can't ignore. He has also served on Regent's Board of Trustees for over 12 years. Jay has earned many more accolades that I could highlight today, but one interesting fact I always like to share is that he has argued a remarkable 12 cases before the U.S. Supreme Court. He is a great friend of Regent University, and I'm also happy to say a grandfather. He has a 3-year-old grandson, but just 2 little twin girls were born in November. So would you please join me in welcoming Dr. Jay Sekulow.
Thank you. You know, I used to say that one of my favorite things was when you go to the Supreme Court of the United States, they start the cases the same way they have since the court first sat, and they call the case name, and then they'll say, Mr. Sekulow will now hear from you. And I used to say, what a thrill that was, the grandson of a Russian immigrant, a fruit peddler in Brooklyn, New York, and they're calling Mr. Sekulow. I now have to say that my favorite thing to be called is Paw Paw. And what a great series of events for Regent University. This is precisely what Dr. Pat Robertson envisioned, that he felt the Lord was leading him to do when he started this university, and now we've been blessed with the leading candidates for President of the United States in an intimate dialogue dealing with the issues of the day. And look at the issues of the day that we're dealing with. We lost a great friend of this university, Justice Antonin Scalia. My legal career tracked Justice Scalia's time on the bench. In fact, the very first case I argued was the second term where Justice Scalia sat. I've litigated before that man for 25 years. And for 25 years, he was on our side when we won. He was our dissent when we lost. He was a great friend of this university. This is an incredibly important election because hopefully the Senate stays strong. The next President of the United States will select at least one justice to the Supreme Court of the United States. And then, of course, the major issues that we're facing as a nation. Now, here's how it's going to work tonight. We're going to get a chance to have real discussion, and you're going to be able to participate and mention the ability to bring in your questions, text those questions and comments. I'm going to introduce the senator, and a video will play, and then Senator Cruz is going to come out, and then Dr. Robertson will be joining the senator, and they're going to have a discussion, and then we're going to be taking your questions. Throughout his entire life, Ted Cruz has proven to be a passionate and effective fighter for limited government, economic growth, and the Constitution. I know this firsthand because I've had the privilege of working with Senator Cruz when he was the Solicitor General of Texas. Winston Churchill famously said, this was a great quote from Churchill, "You have enemies? Good. That means you've stood up for something at some time in your life." I will tell you this, Ted Cruz has stood up for many things and a defender of freedom. As Solicitor General for the state of Texas and in private practice, Ted authored 80 U.S. Supreme Court briefs and argued 43 oral arguments, including 9 before the Supreme Court of the United States. Senator Cruz has also won an unprecedented series of victories, many cases that we were also involved in, where Senator Cruz led the charge. That was everything from Second Amendment rights to the keeping the phrase "under God" in the Pledge of Allegiance. Of course, the challenge to Obamacare, which disappointingly ended in the Supreme Court, But Ted Cruz has led and continued to lead in the fight to repeal Obamacare. He's also been at the forefront. We had the privilege of authoring a brief that Senator Cruz has been involved with, led the charge again on the president's unconstitutional overreach, executive action on amnesty. He's focused on defending life, the First and Second Amendments, and our entire Bill of Rights. You've seen his family, you've seen Heidi, you've seen the two kids, Caroline and Catherine, and his entire family have been blessed to really live the American dream. I can relate to that. He's the son of an immigrant, I'm the grandson of an immigrant. I get to argue cases at the Supreme Court, he gets to run for President of the United States. That's a pretty good deal. I want you to watch the video that's going to be on the screen to get a little bit more of an understanding of the man, Senator Ted Cruz.
Hi, my name is Kelly Shackelford, and I've been doing religious liberty cases for over 26 years. Our founding fathers called religious freedom our first freedom. They did so not just because it's the first two clauses of the First Amendment, but because they knew if you lose your religious freedom, you'll lose all your freedoms. There's no better person to host this topic than Ted Cruz. I'm not saying this because his father's a pastor. I'm not even saying this because many know of Ted's brilliance, his many arguments before the United States Supreme Court, and his constitutional expertise. I'm saying this because of something few people know. Way before Ted ever considered running for office, he was giving his time for religious freedom. Ted donated hundreds of thousands of dollars of time for religious liberty cases. This was a great sacrifice of time and money, but he did it because it's a priority and a commitment to him. When the Mojave Veterans Memorial was attacked by the ACLU, Ted donated his time to stand with me and Liberty Institute in representing millions of veterans from the American Legion, the VFW, the Military Order of the Purple Heart, and American ex-prisoners of war. When the case went to the Supreme Court, this 70-year-old memorial, which had been put up by the hands of World War I veterans themselves, was ordered to be torn down by the lower courts and to be covered while the case went on appeal. The memorial, the cross, was actually covered with a bag, and then a chain was wrapped around the bottom with a padlock. At the United States Supreme Court, we were able to reverse the decisions below. The bag is off, the memorial is back up, and it was in part because Ted Cruz gave his tremendous talent free of charge to millions of veterans. The United States Supreme Court cited our brief over and over again in its decision. If anyone has the background, the commitment, and the understanding to cover this issue, it's Ted Cruz. I'm very thankful for him as a friend, a brilliant constitutional lawyer, and as a leader protecting our first freedom. God bless you, Ted Cruz.
Ladies and gentlemen, please welcome Senator Ted Cruz.
God bless Regent University. What a privilege to be with you tonight. Thank you for welcoming me here. I'm honored to join you. You know, there are many issues to discuss, many challenges facing this country in this election. But none more important than the topic Jay just discussed. Jay and I have been friends many, many years. And that is the implications on the U.S. Supreme Court and on the Bill of Rights of Justice Scalia's passing. Just a few days ago, I attended Justice Scalia's funeral. He was someone who had been a personal friend, someone I'd known for 20 years. And he was a lion of the law, a fierce defender of the Bill of Rights. And his passing underscores that the stakes of this presidential election are not just one, but two branches of government. We are one liberal justice away from a 5-justice left-wing majority, the likes of which this country has never seen, that will undermine our basic rights. You know, as Jay mentioned, before I was in the Senate, I was the Solicitor General of Texas, the chief lawyer for the state in front of the U.S. Supreme Court. We brought together a coalition of states defending the federal ban on partial birth abortion, and we won 5-4. 5-4. We are one liberal justice away from the Supreme Court striking down every state and federal restriction on abortion and mandating unlimited abortion on demand up till the moment of delivery, partial birth with taxpayer funding, and no parental notification. Another case from my tenure as Solicitor General, we defended the Ten Commandments monument that stands on the state capitol grounds in Texas. We went to the U.S. Supreme Court and we won 5-4. Again, 5-4. We are one liberal justice away from the Supreme Court ordering Ten Commandments monuments to be torn down at courthouses and city halls and public parks all over this country. You know, Justice Scalia's most notable majority opinion was the case of Heller versus District of Columbia. That's a case I know very, very well, because in that case I represented 31 states defending the Second Amendment right to keep and bear arms. And we won 5-4. 5-4. Now, what was the position of the four dissenters? It was not that some gun control laws are sometimes permissible. No, it was much more radical than that. The position of the four dissenters was that the Second Amendment does not protect any individual right to keep and bear arms whatsoever, that it is only a collective right of the militia, which is nothing but fancy lawyer talk for a non-existent right. One more liberal justice, and the court will overturn Heller and conclude that not a single one of us has any individual right to keep and bear arms whatsoever, that the government can make it a crime for any of us to own a firearm, and none of us can challenge that in court. That's what the stakes are in this election. You know, Kelly Shackelford talked about the Mojave Desert Veterans Memorial. We won that case 5-4. We are one liberal justice away from the Supreme Court ordering veterans memorials torn down all over this country. And I'll tell you, we're not far away from the court ordering the chisels to come out to remove the crosses and the stars of David from the tombstones of fallen soldiers. That's what the stakes are in this election. Now, Democrats, when they nominate Supreme Court justices, they bat nearly 1,000. Just about every Democratic Supreme Court justice votes exactly the way they want on just about every single case. Republicans, on the other hand, have a terrible batting average. It's less than 500. Many of the worst judicial activists were Republican appointees. Earl Warren, Bill Brennan, John Paul Stevens, David Souter, Harry Blackmun, the author of Roe versus Wade, was a Republican appointee. Now, why is that? It's actually not that Republicans are bad at this. It's not that Republicans don't know how to do this. It's that too many Republican presidents don't value the court enough to spend the political capital needed to nominate and confirm proven conservatives. You know, if you look at the justices that have honored their oath, that have been faithful to the Constitution, Antonin Scalia, Clarence Thomas, Sam Alito, my former boss at the Supreme Court, Chief Justice William Rehnquist, every one of them had a long, proven record of standing for the Constitution, defending conservative principles, and paying a price, being vilified for it. I'm actually most interested in how someone behaves when they're taking the heat, when the press is ridiculing them, when they're mocking them, not when it's easy, but what happens when you take the heat. Do you stand or do you fold under pressure? But what inevitably happens, if you nominate a proven conservative, the Democrats get the joke. They're using the Supreme Court to try to fundamentally remake this country. And so if you nominate a proven conservative, they will fight you tooth and nail. And what happens, it's not that Republican presidents want a liberal on the court. It's that too many of them don't care one way or the other. And so they're not willing to invest the political capital to confirm a proven conservative because they've got some other legislative priority that matters more. And so their staff comes to them and says, well, Mr. President, we've got a stealth candidate. Somebody who's never said or written or done anything to prove that they're a conservative. But really, secretly, wink, wink, nudge, nudge, they're a conservative. Now, let me tell you something. If you have lived 50 years of your life and you've never said or written or done anything to prove you're a conservative, you ain't. And if by some miracle you are, then maybe the Supreme Court of the United States is not the best place to find out. Every time we have gone with a stealth nominee, the result has been a disaster. Now, why is that relevant? Well, I think we saw last night at the debate why it was relevant. We saw an exchange between Donald Trump and me, where Donald explained when it came to religious liberty in the Supreme Court that we needed to be flexible. We needed to be willing to cut deals with the Democrats. Let me tell you right now, I have no interest in cutting a deal with Harry Reid and agreeing on a justice that will undermine the Constitution. And I think Justice Scalia's passing has caused the men and women of Virginia and men and women all across this country, all across the Super Tuesday states, to look at the individuals on that stage and say, who do I know? Who do I know beyond a shadow of a doubt is going to invest the political capital, is going to stand and fight, is going to do whatever it takes? And I will tell you this, I give you my solemn word, as someone who has spent his entire adult life fighting to defend the Constitution and the Bill of Rights, that every justice I appoint to the court will be a principled constitutionalist with a proven record who will vigorously defend the Bill of Rights for your children and for mine. And I want to say, the next 4 days are critical. Super Tuesday, I believe, will be the most important day in this entire presidential election. You've got a dozen states across the country, including Virginia, all voting next Tuesday. And one of two things is likely to happen. One, it is possible that Donald Trump will steamroll through with massive victories everywhere and be unstoppable. I hope that that does not happen. I think that is a very dangerous outcome. The other possibility, 65% of Republicans believe that Donald Trump is not the right candidate, not the best candidate to go head-to-head with Hillary, is not the best candidate to beat Hillary in November. And the only campaign that has beaten Donald Trump and that I believe can beat Donald Trump is our campaign. And so we are working day and night, every day from now until next Tuesday, to turn out courageous conservatives, to continue bringing together that old Reagan coalition of conservatives and evangelicals and libertarians and young people and Reagan Democrats. And if you're one of the 65% of Republicans who think Donald Trump may not be the best candidate to go head-to-head with Hillary, then I would encourage you, even if you might like some other candidate, listen, there are good people in this race who I like and respect. But there's only one candidate in a position to beat Donald Trump on Super Tuesday, and that is us. And so I would ask you to stand together with us, because if we stand together, we're going to have a terrific night on Super Tuesday. We're going to win the Republican nomination. And then we are going to bring back to the polls the millions of evangelicals, the millions of Reagan Democrats, the working class men and women who've gotten hammered the last 7 years under the Obama economy, and we will win the general election and turn this country around, get back to the free market principles and constitutional liberties that have built America into the greatest country in the history of the world.
Please welcome the founder, chancellor, and CEO of Regent University, Dr. M.G. Pat Robertson.
Thank you. Ted, great work. Great work, buddy. God bless you. Thank you. Thank you all. God bless you. Wonderful. Thank you. Ted, that was inspiring. Coming up, there's a state that's got a whole lot of electoral votes, whole lot of delegates. It's the state of Texas, and you ran for a statewide election and you won it. The governor has endorsed you. Can you take Texas coming up Tuesday?
Look, I am very encouraged where we are in Texas. It is my home state. I love the people of Texas. And we are in a very strong position in Texas. Governor Greg Abbott has endorsed me. Former Governor Rick Perry has endorsed me. Lieutenant Governor Dan Patrick has endorsed me. We have seen our coalition on the ground is incredibly strong. I think we're going to have a very, very good night in Texas.
You won Iowa going away. That was a tremendous victory. You've been building up some delegates. How do you see the path to the nomination? What's your strategy?
Well, I think Super Tuesday is going to be critical for that. You know, you look at historically, nobody has ever won the nomination without winning one of the first three states, Iowa, New Hampshire, South Carolina. Right now, there are only two of us who have done that, Donald Trump and me. Super Tuesday are the most delegates that are awarded on a single day. Roughly 600 delegates. It takes 1,237 to win the nomination. And Texas alone is 155 delegates. It's almost 15% of the total needed to be the nominee.
It's winner state take all, right?
It is not. It's proportional. But it's a complicated proportional formula, and most of the states are, where there's a minimum threshold of 20%. I think we are likely to win a significant chunk of delegates in Texas, and I believe we'll win. I think what is the most likely outcome coming out of Super Tuesday is Donald Trump will have a big chunk of delegates, we'll have a big chunk of delegates, and then I think there's going to be a big drop-off with the other candidates. And really what I hope Super Tuesday does is focuses this race into a two-man race between me and Donald, because the polling shows head-to-head. Not only did we beat Donald, but we beat him badly. We beat him 56-40. Donald has got a relatively high floor of about 20 to 25%. You know, he joked he could go onto Fifth Avenue and shoot somebody and he wouldn't lose any votes. You know, I think that 20 to 25% is probably that floor, but I think he also has a ceiling of about 35 to 40%. And so if you get to a head-to-head choice between Donald and a proven conservative, then I think we go on to win, and I hope Super Tuesday sets that up.
Let me ask you these debates. I ran, you know, in '88, and we were under the Reagan 11th commandment, thou shalt not speak ill of any fellow Republican. And we kept our mouths shut. I was in a debate where Bob Strauss tried to get me to attack George Bush, and I wouldn't do it. And Strauss said, I told you it wouldn't work, you know, but we wouldn't do that. I have never seen anything like it. I mean, calling a fellow candidate a con man and things like that. Doesn't that grieve you as you're part of you've been to those debates?
Look, I think that's exactly right. You know, I remember well when you ran for president in '88. Both my mom and dad were volunteers on your presidential campaign.
He told me he voted. That may have been his first vote, but it shows how smart your family is.
You know, there is no doubt that this cycle, it has gotten nasty and personal in a way that you have to go back a long time to find another race this way. You know, my approach from the beginning is I can't control what others do, but I can control what I do. And so the way I have tried to approach it is if others impugn my integrity, I mean, they have thrown some nasty insults my way. They've gone after my character. They've gone after my integrity. I don't respond in kind. I don't respond in insults, and I'm not going to. Now, I do think policy is fair game. That politics, that should be the meat of politics, is comparing your record to another candidate's record, your vision to another candidate's vision. But I'm not going to engage in insults. And I'll tell you really what I'm trying to follow is the biblical principle that if you repay unkindness with kindness, that it's like heaping coals on top of their head. And so that has been my approach, and it's how I intend to continue regardless of what other people say.
Assuming that you're victorious and that you win the general election, what are your top priorities? We talked very brilliantly about judges. We all understand that that's a key to get the appropriate. The next president could have as many as 3 vacancies.
Yeah.
3.
And the court is so much in balance. We're going to have, hopefully, Justice Scalia's vacancy for the new president. immediately, and I will commit, as I just did, that every justice will be a principled constitutionalist. Beyond that, my top priorities are economic growth and restoring America's leadership in the world. And I've pledged to do 5 things on the first day in office. Rescind every single illegal and unconstitutional executive action that Barack Obama has taken.
The nice thing about that, you don't need any congressional approval. You can do that by a stroke of the pen as president.
That is exactly right. And, you know, a lot of folks in the media say, gosh, you know, how do you change the direction of the ship estate? They try to convince conservatives we can't win, and even if we could win, we can't change anything. Well, as you know, the president has really 3 significant levers of presidential authority to change the path we're on. The first is executive power. That's been what Obama's abused. But the silver lining is everything done with executive power can be undone with executive power. That's why every one of those orders can be rescinded by the president on day one. It's why I've also pledged on day one to instruct the Department of Justice to open an investigation into Planned Parenthood and to prosecute any and all criminal violations.
Does that include an inquiry into Hillary Clinton's emails?
Yes.
Go ahead.
You know, it is a sad thing that this Department of Justice is so politicized that every decision is partisan. You know, I'm an alumnus of the Department of Justice. I was an Associate Deputy Attorney General at the Justice Department. And for centuries, the Justice Department has been nonpartisan. It has been outside of partisan politics. You know, one of the saddest statements, if you ask reporters in Washington, is Hillary going to be indicted? In an unguarded, off-the-record moment, they'll tell you, well, it depends on whether the Obama White House decides politically they want her or not. If they want her still to be the nominee and the candidate, she won't be indicted. If they get tired of her, then yes, she will. What a sad statement that people accept that the administration of justice is decided by some political hack in the West Wing. That is not going to be the case if I am president. The Justice Department's only fidelity will be to the laws and the Constitution of the United States.
Well, I interrupt as you keep going on your proposal. What are you going to do?
So the third thing I'll do on day one is instruct every federal agency that the persecution of religious liberty ends that day. Now, all 3 of those can be done via executive power. The second avenue for changing the direction of the ship estate is foreign policy, and foreign policy likewise can change overnight. So on day one, I intend to rip to shreds this catastrophic Iranian nuclear deal.
Has never been ratified by the Senate. It does not rise to a treaty, so it's an executive action period.
That's exactly right. It is purely an executive agreement. It doesn't have force of law, so the next president can change it on day one. And likewise, on day one, I intend to begin the process of moving the American embassy in Israel to Jerusalem, the once and eternal capital.
And that has been approved by the Congress and blocked by the State Department for years.
You're right. So existing legislation provides that the embassy should be in Jerusalem. Look, our embassies in every other country are in their capital. But that legislation has a presidential waiver, and presidents for years keep waiving it. And the reason they waive it, it's not complicated. They say, well, gosh, if we move the embassy to Jerusalem, it'll make other folks in the Middle East really, really unhappy with us. Well, if you hadn't noticed, they're already really unhappy with us. And that statement, look, for 7 years, we've been abandoning our friends and allies. And we've been showing weakness and appeasement to our enemies. And that act of moving the embassy in Jerusalem, it's the right thing to do, but it's also a powerful statement to Israel, to our allies, and to our enemies that America is back. And that...
My reporter, Chuck Holton, did a piece today on the use of chemical weapons by ISIS against the Peshmerga in northern Iraq. There wasn't any question about it. We had pictures of the places where the shells had exploded. We actually had a man who fainted on camera, who had been gassed. But the president absolutely refuses to identify ISIS for what it is. What would you do with this Islamic extremist? What are you going to do with them?
You are absolutely right. This president, he refuses even to utter the words radical Islamic terrorism. And indeed, he often acts as an apologist for radical Islamic terrorism, giving excuses, giving justifications, comparing it to the Crusades or the Inquisitions. Listen, ISIS is the face of evil. I think we need to start with a president that lays out the objective. We will utterly defeat radical Islamic terrorism. We will utterly destroy ISIS. And once the commander-in-chief lays out that objective, I think we need to use overwhelming air power. And we need to combine it. You mentioned the Peshmerga, the fighting forces of the Kurds. We should be arming the Kurds. They're fighting ISIS right now. ISIS is using American military equipment they seized in Iraq. President Obama refuses to arm the Kurds because of political reasons that it would upset Baghdad. We ought to let them be our boots on the ground. And between overwhelming air power and the Kurds, and then beyond that, we may well need to embed special forces to direct our air power. But if and when we do that, you know, one of the saddest aspects of the last 7 years has been the president sending our fighting men and women into combat with rules of engagement that essentially tie their arms behind their back where they can't defend themselves. And in January 2017, that will end.
All right. The next president is going to face an extraordinary world. North Korea claims to have exploded a thermonuclear device. Without question, the Iranians are now they got missile technology that might reach Europe and maybe beyond. They're working as hard as they can on nuclear devices. And now the Chinese have armed the Paracel and the Spratly Islands and are building islands and are actually placing missile sites. What would you do to the Chinese, for example? I mean, as much as I understand, as much as $5 trillion trade in the South China Sea, how are we going to force them to leave those seaways open?
Well, we've got a range of enemies with different degrees of hostility. On one level, you've got ISIS and you've got Iran, who I think are implacable enemies. They have declared war on us. Their intention is to murder us. I think our behavior to ISIS and Iran is qualitatively different. You know, I'm reminded of an editorial cartoon I saw that has the Ayatollah Khamenei in Iran saying, "Death to all Americans." And then it has John Kerry saying, "Can we meet you halfway?" There is no middle ground with religious zealots that are seeking our murder, and we need to behave accordingly. You know, with regard to China and Russia, it is more complicated. They are not our friends, but they are not our enemies at the same level that ISIS or Iran is. They are not seeking to murder us. And with China, we have complicated economic relationships. They're a major trading partner. They are getting more and more bellicose, expressing and expanding their power in the Pacific. And that is in response to the weakness of President Obama. I think the answer to them, and also Russia, is restoring American strength. I think the only thing that China and Russia respond to is American strength. And what Reagan demonstrated is there are all sorts of elements of utilizing power short of sending in the Marines. So let me give you an example. In Europe, when Russia invaded Ukraine, what I called for President Obama to do at the time was a couple of things. Number one, he should have immediately installed the anti-ballistic missile batteries in Poland and the Czech Republic that were scheduled to go into place. President Obama canceled them in 2009 in an effort to appease Putin. The appeasement didn't work. But number two, critically, there were at the time pending 22 applications to export liquid natural gas. President Obama should have held a national TV conference and approved all 22 on the spot. That would have helped the people of Ukraine and Europe stand free from Russian economic blackmail.
Sure.
It would have hit Putin where it hurts in the pocketbook. You know, John McCain has a great phrase for Russia. He refers to Russia as a gas station with a country attached. And it would have produced jobs and economic growth here at home. Those are the examples of sort of you can use U.S. power short of, look, no rational person wants to see America in a shooting war with either Russia or China. You don't have nuclear superpowers shooting tanks or missiles at each other. That doesn't end well.
Right.
But there's all sorts of ways of expressing strength and power against them short of engaging in military conflict, and we need a president who will stand up to them.
Well, Gazprom, actually, Gazprom has Europe by the throat, and I understand they've tried to double the price of gas in the Ukraine. So, I mean, it's a major problem, and we don't deal with it. What would you do?
This president is so captive to the far left, to the radical environmentalists. Now, I'll tell you, politically, it presents an enormous opportunity because President Obama and Hillary Clinton, they have chosen between two typical Democratic favored children. They have chosen to go with California environmentalist billionaires instead of the jobs of union members. Now, that presents an amazing opportunity to go and campaign for the union members all across this country who want to have jobs. You know, one of the most encouraging things about Iowa, if you look at the results there, now Donald Trump received the most votes any Republican had ever received in the history of the Iowa caucuses. And yet we received even substantially more than that. And what was so encouraging, we won conservatives, we won evangelicals, but we also won Reagan Democrats, the working class, blue collar, often Catholics across the Midwest, and we won young people. I mean, that's the old Reagan coalition coming together, and I think it is a real opportunity. My passion is fighting for the working men and women of this country, the truck drivers, the mechanics, the steel workers, the auto workers, the construction workers, all of the people getting hammered by Obama's amnesty, getting hammered by the policies that enrich Washington and hurt the working men and women of this country, and that's who we should be fighting for.
That action on Keystone was unconscionable. I mean, the labor unions clearly thought they would get maybe as many as 20,000 jobs, and Obama said, no, you're exactly right. Environmentalists versus labor. Listen, right now we've got some questions from our audience here in the studio and others calling in, and Jay, do you have those questions?
Yes, sir.
All right.
All right. On demand. Just like your video system. There you go. So we do have questions from the audience, Senator, and we've got some questions from online as well. Let me start with this. This is from Brian. He's actually from College Station, Texas. He asked, Senator Cruz, if you were elected president, what would you do to reform and fix the VA?
It's a great question. If you look at the VA, you know, a couple of months ago, Hillary said that she thought the scandal at the VA was not that big a deal. It was blown out of proportion. I think that's completely wrong. When you have government officials lying, keeping bogus books, wrongfully denying veterans potentially life-saving care that they've earned and they deserve, I think it is a scandal and it's an outrage. Two things will change if I'm president. Number one, there will be accountability. Anyone who wrongfully denied care will be terminated. Anyone who violated the criminal law will be prosecuted. But number two, Jay, the most important reform is fundamental reform, which is we need to give veterans the right to choose their own doctor. If you want to go to the VA doctor, fine. But there's no reason why veterans shouldn't be able to go to the cardiologist down the street at the private hospital. That competition is the best thing to fix the problem, giving veterans the health care that they've earned and they deserve. And as president, that's what I intend to do.
Senator, let me follow up with something that came up during debate, and I want to get I want you to explain to the audience the significance. As lawyers, we understand that. We've got a situation where Planned Parenthood video expose comes out, and in full disclosure, we're representing the American Center for Law and Justice, representing one of the board members in the case. So representing one of the defendants. They have these exposés, discloses what Planned Parenthood's doing. In Texas, your state, grand jury in Houston, in investigating the case, doesn't issue an indictment against Planned Parenthood, but rather against the videographers that reported the crime. You're President of the United States. What do you do?
Well, listen, it was disgraceful and very disappointing what happened with the Harris County DA. That was wrong. And you know, you look at those videos. Listen, as believers, I think those videos presented an enormous opportunity and still present an enormous opportunity to move people's hearts and minds. You know, I've encouraged Americans, whether you're pro-choice or pro-life, especially if you call yourself pro-choice, to watch those videos. And just ask, are those my values as you see Planned Parenthood officials laughing, sipping Chardonnay, and callously, heartlessly selling the body parts of unborn children? Now, one of the reasons why I pledged on day one to direct the Department of Justice to open an investigation is because in addition to being horrific and grossly immoral and shocking, it is also a federal crime. Federal criminal law makes it a felony with 10 years in prison to sell the body parts of an unborn child for profit. Now, on the face of the videos, you see them bargaining to sell the body parts of unborn children. Their only legal defense, plausibly, is they could argue it was not for profit, and that would be presumably litigated in the course of a criminal prosecution. And yet, just like we were talking about Hillary indictment, nobody thinks there's any chance the Obama Justice Department would even begin to investigate this, because Planned Parenthood is such a political ally of the Democrats that even though they're caught on film apparently committing a pattern of felonies, they are immune from prosecution. And I will say this is one of the areas where I've got a very sharp difference of opinion with Donald Trump. You know, Donald has said in the last couple of debates that he thinks Planned Parenthood is wonderful. Look, they are the largest abortionists in this country. Millions of unborn children have lost their lives at the hands of Planned Parenthood. And these videos demonstrated that it appears they are an ongoing criminal enterprise illegally selling the body parts of unborn children. I don't think there is anything in any respect that is wonderful about Planned Parenthood. And in my administration, they would be treated the same as anyone else and prosecuted if they violated the law.
Thank you, Senator. We have a question from Mark Rogers, came in online. As Christians, we're called to help the poor and needy, the least of these. Talk to us about your ideas for helping, especially those suffering extreme poverty in Africa.
It is a great question. When you look at, well, if you look at abroad in Africa, my wife Heidi is the daughter of Christian missionaries. She actually lived in Africa as a little girl. She lived in Kenya and Nigeria. And her brother, my brother-in-law, is a missionary in Haiti right now. And there's no doubt there's incredible poverty and suffering, and it is one of the great legacies of the Christian church that we have reached out and spread the gospel, but also helped people in poverty and suffering all over the world. And you know, how you change poverty, I think the most potent thing is changing the conditions on the ground so that you have countries that you encourage to develop rule of law, develop property rights, develop free enterprise. You know, the old adage, give a man a fish, you feed him for a day, teach a man to fish, you feed him for a lifetime. I think that's what we need to work to do, is spreading free market principles. And here at home, you know, I try to think of all domestic policy from the perspective of my dad. My dad came from Cuba in 1957. He had been imprisoned. He was tortured in Cuba as a teenager. And when he came to America, he was just 18. He couldn't speak English. He had $100 in his underwear, and he washed dishes making 50 cents an hour. And I try to think of every policy, all right, how would it have impacted my dad? It's one of the reasons I'm so passionately opposed to Obamacare. Because if Obamacare were the law of the land today, the odds are very high my father would have been laid off from his job washing dishes. Because it's people just like him, teenage kids washing dishes, who are losing their jobs because of the taxes and regulations on small businesses. And if he hadn't been laid off, the odds are overwhelming. They would have had his hours forcibly reduced to 28, 29 hours a week, because Obamacare kicks in at 30 hours a week. And you can't feed your kids, you can't pay your way through college on 28, 29 hours a week. And so I think our focus for everyone should be easing the means of ascent up the economic ladder, empowering them, what I've called opportunity conservatism, that every focus should be on individual responsibility, on helping people climb the economic ladder.
Go ahead, Pat.
Senator, this has been so terrific. I just think Senator Cruz has done a fabulous job, but I know he's tired and he's got a big schedule ahead of him. I don't want to impose any more on his graciousness, but you've been so nice to be with us, and this has been a very stimulating discussion. We wish you the very best.
Well,
God bless you.
Join me in thanking Dr. Robertson, Senator Cruz.
Thank you very much. Hope that helped you. It was fantastic.
Right this way, Senator.